Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar, Moving Forward in a New Commercial Payments Landscape. I'm excited to be joined by U.S. Bank VP of Commercial Payments, Tory Passons, and TravelBank CRO, Josh Abich. These subject experts are going to share their own experience and perspectives on managing commercial payments, so I'm looking forward to hearing what their insights are on today's topic. Now I'll let our panelists tell you a little about themselves. Josh, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Tiffany. Good morning, good afternoon. Looks like we have a number of prospective customers and partners on. So thank you so much for joining us. Super excited to get into the discussion. My name is Josh Abich, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at TravelBank. So I've got the ultimate responsibility of serving our customers across marketing, sales, and customer success. I have a personal and professional passion of building high-performing teams that thrive on solving our customers' business problems. So thanks again for the opportunity to have this discussion with you all and look forward to it.
Thanks, Josh. Tory, would you like to give them some background about yourself next?
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I'm Tory Passons. I'm a product manager at US Bank. I work in the corporate payments division. I primarily work on partnerships and new product development. And ideally, where those two things come together is where I love to live my life. Thus, trying to meet customers where they're at on the platforms they're in, like TravelBank, instead of forcing them to our platforms at US Bank. And so I've been in product for a while. I feel like I've been in product before product was a thing, and even in product in financial services for at least 10 years. So it's been a fun journey, and working with partners like TravelBank has been really fun. So I'm excited to be here today and tell you what we've got going.
Thanks, Tory. Today, we're going to discuss how the commercial payments landscape has changed and the benefits of adopting a virtual card setup. We'll address not only how the commercial payments landscape is changing, but what that means for your business, how companies are solving commercial payments challenges with virtual cards, the benefits of adopting a virtual card for your company, and some predictions from our subject experts for the future of payments. Before we dive into the content, a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please type them as we go in the chat, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. And after the webinar, we'll be sending you a recap of today's session and a link for related resources. All right, so now jumping into today's topic, let's discuss how is the commercial payments landscape changing? Tory, would you like to take that first?
Sure, it's changing fast. Before we dive into the how, I want to talk about the core of what's driving it. And virtual card is at the center of the change happening in the payments industry. And so as it shifts, I just want to get a real basic level understanding here on this call of what we are talking about when we say virtual card. First, ultimately, it's a card that has no plastic. It's a corporate credit card. It can have a 16-digit credit card number, or it can be tokenized. I'll talk about that here in a second. And it can be set up for a short period of time, for one day, for a very specific amount, and it can have MCC controls in place. So much like a corporate credit card with plastic can have those MCC controls in place, you can do the same with virtual credit cards. And so we've been pushing virtual credit cards for over 10 years at US Bank, although they seem to be much more prominent now as they move down market. And so especially with COVID hitting, which we'll talk about that too. But beyond just pushing that 16-digit credit card number and CVV, so you can make a purchase with it, we can also push the token. So if you think about tokenized cards with chips that you dip in a point of sale device, it's that same technology that now we can push from one individual to the other. So I can push it to Josh, he can put it in his mobile wallet, and then he can do either. He can see the card number if he wants to see it or needs to see it, or he can just use his device at point of sale. So I bring this up because this technology and the progression of the technology is very important to the future of payments and the pivot in payments, especially for what happened in 2020. So it's been really interesting to watch. If you go to the next slide, this is also really interesting to me. It's a little convoluted when you first look at it, but you'll notice if you focus in on 2020, corporate card spend in commercial credit went down in 2020. That's no big surprise to anyone. Corporate travel stopped completely. But what's interesting is virtual card spend went up. And so in virtual card spend is trending up and was trending up even pre-COVID. Now it's being accelerated. So if you look at that acceleration, by 2024, we're looking at 414 billion in spend versus 177 in just 2019. So it's a rapid growth. COVID is definitely pushing that growth and creating change in the market. So obviously a lot of spend moving towards virtual cards, and it's actually overtaking P-card in 2021. US Bank was the first issuing bank to come out with the P-card, so now it's fun to watch our virtual cards overtake our P-card program, frankly. And it's been changing a lot, and COVID's been really, I almost said helping with that change, but I would say forcing some of that change to happen. As I look at that in my own personal life, I know I stopped going to stores that don't accept mobile payment because I have my cards on my phone. And so if it's a hardware store or grocery store or even the gas stations by my house now are starting to take mobile payment. And so I am personally going to merchants where I don't have to touch the point of sale device. After last March 2020, I think we all got very aware of how many things we touched once we left the house, and that includes payment. And so I've made that change. The industry is also making that change. People were stuck at home quickly for corporations, and they had to make purchases with their personal cards and then try to get reimbursed from their companies. So our phones started ringing off the hook saying, you know, I have to sneak people into the office to cut paper checks to mail them to people who are using personal cards. And this just is not functionally working. Way too many touch points. How do we fix this? And so we did work towards a solve that we'll talk about here in a minute. But that pain point was a driving force to a new product we brought out too. But ultimately trying to make it seamless for customers so they don't have to come in contact with point of sale devices, as well as solve for the reconciliation challenge and reimbursement challenge that happens when you have that much paper involved and personal card spend involved. So it's been a really interesting shift. So I can use mobile and contactless payments interchangeably a lot. So I want to pause on that for a moment and just give you a description of what I mean. So mobile payment is when you can put your corporate card or your personal card, frankly, in your mobile wallet, versus contactless payment is usually pointed towards plastic, where you can just bring the plastic near the point of sale device. It's the same technology through the tokenization of the card communicating with the point of sale. And so regardless if you're using that plastic or your mobile, being contactless is important in a COVID world or post-COVID world. And it's looking to triple the payments by 2024 to 6 trillion. That's just a huge number from 2 trillion in 2020. Over 50% of Americans are already using contactless payments. So we're being trained. We've been trained for a couple of years now on the plastic, and it's moving to mobile on how to use contactless point of sale devices and things like phones and plastic. As well, small businesses are reporting a spike in contactless payments, not to mention US Bank's sister company, Elva Merchant Services. We ship point of sale devices, or they do, and over 95% of the point of sale devices that they ship are now contactless enabled, be it either mobile or contactless card. So quite a trend happening and an acceleration happening because of the events in 2020.
Thanks, Tori. That's great insight. Now that we have a better understanding of the changing landscape, let's discuss how are virtual cards solving commercial payment challenges. Josh, would you like to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tiffany. So I would summarize from what we see three main challenges that TravelBank and US Bank are collectively solving. Number one, I would say, is fraud reduction. So by simply having personal cards out there, whether intentional or not, this is an area of absolute risk for the company if you have personal cards out there. So simply by consolidating into corporate card and virtual card specifically, we believe you'll see a reduction in fraud. Number two, you'll gain more control and visibility to spend. So again, with a mix of personal cards and corporate cards, our customers are telling us that it's very hard for the finance and accounting teams to simply keep track of company spend. On top of that, Tori mentioned reconciliation. It's a process that I'm not super familiar with, but for all of our accounting friends out there, we know that it's a difficult process. And so by consolidating corporate card alongside travel and expense management into one platform, we're helping companies save a lot of time in the reconciliation process. Third, and there's probably a ton of use cases behind the user experience, but number three, I would say we simply help provide a better employee experience. There's countless use cases. Again, one that comes to mind being in the travel business is a problem that's been, I would say, unsolved in the industry for some time, which is many employees, the majority of employees simply do not have a corporate card. And some companies have been on board with a virtual card, but in the case of booking travel, if a company books travel for an employee and they simply don't have the corporate card, it is not a very fun process for that employee to check in at a hotel, for example. So without the actual physical card, believe it or not, there's still a lot of faxing that's going on, even though it's 2021. So a fax has to go to the hotel has to verify the transaction. If the fax isn't there, I can tell you it's not a very fun process for that employee just to simply check in. So with the virtual payment and virtual card, just right from the mobile wallet, as Tori mentioned, the employee can simply just check in at the hotel very seamlessly. And we're going to talk about how simple that process is to manage. So that's one big use case. Another one is simply many employees out there have to float expenses if they're using their personal card, which, as you know, many employees are simply living paycheck to paycheck. And so having to float these expenses typically does not provide the greatest experience, and they have to wait for the company to reimburse them. Let's say the company has a great reimbursement process. Typically, it takes several weeks for that employee to be reimbursed. And again, for some employees, it's simply just too long. So virtual cards solve this problem just by simply giving access to the employee to make the purchase. The company still has a significant amount of control and visibility to that process. And that's what we want to talk to you a little bit more about.
Yeah, so Tori, US Bank quickly recognized the potential of a thoughtful virtual corporate card. Can you tell us a little bit more about that product?
Yeah, as I move into that too, I'm just pausing for a moment on what you said, Josh, around fax machines. I think it's interesting that they are still in motion, and a lot of people are probably surprised to hear you even say it. But really, it's hotels keeping faxes in production today because of the process you're talking about. It was a difficult solve in the past before you could push a virtual card through tokenization. And really, adoption was low by hotels because there wasn't a big need for it. The solve now during COVID on the user has gone up so much that hotels are quickly adopting this concept of contactless payment. I've traveled 3 times since COVID hit personally, and I know it's a small data point, but all 3 times I could check in without ever giving them my plastic card. That's rare. Pre-COVID, I was traveling 3 times a month, And I would say maybe 1 in 10, I could use it because I always try to just to test the market. So it's been fun to watch that shift too because of the technology behind it. Talking about Instant Card, going back to the pain that I mentioned of companies having their employees go work from home, they didn't want to give them a corporate card, but they need to spend the reconciliation challenge and reimbursement challenge trying to get them checks. So what we built in 2020, really as quick as we could after the phone started ringing, was this concept of Instant Card. And so we also did this along with TravelBank, integrating the data at the same time so customers could have that feed. I'll have Josh talk to you a little bit about that integration here in a minute. But the solve for the pain, if you can go to the next slide, Tiffany, thanks. This is what Instant Card does. So it allows me to push Josh a card in real time. I can control the credit limit, the expiration date, and I can push it to him whenever he needs it. So it also has MCC controls, like I mentioned, for normal virtual cards. But this one's a little different because once he downloads the app, the card is already in the app. He can see the card number and CVV and expiration date to make his purchase. And he can add it to his mobile wallet with a simple tap. And he gets green path every time because it's a US bank issuing card to a US bank app being Instant Card. And when I say green path, I mean he doesn't have to call 1-800 number to verify. He doesn't have to do copy and paste to get it into his wallet. It's just a very simple add to wallet, be it Google Pay or Apple Pay. And the controls in place are phenomenal. So it can be for a day, it can be for 5 days, can be for $100 or $10,000. And so to be able to do that seamlessly has really helped our customers deal with this challenge of not just employees at home, but also contractors in the field that need to make a purchase. There's a lot of use cases where you don't want plastic floating around. And I'm glad you brought that up about fraud. There's almost no fraud, Josh, as you know, associated with virtual cards. Because if you think about it, it's a moment in time when the card is valid for a certain credit limit. Sometimes it's for one purchase only. And so the controls, and it can be controlled down to just a few MCCs. Thus, you couldn't use it for travel, but you can use it to buy your widget for your company. That's really combating fraud. For them to try to get to that card in that moment and use it is very, very difficult, as smart as they are. So that's really helpful, having the controls in place and the lack of fraud. So it's a really simple app that allows all these positives to happen. And then we've done a bunch of work with TravelBank in parallel to make it even better.
Thanks, Tory. So Josh, can you tell us a little bit about how the company benefits from adopting Instant Card with TravelBank?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm looking at the real-time questions too. We had one come in, which is very on topic, which is, are we seeing patterns in how companies are using virtual cards for? Like, what are they using it for? And we do see some consistency. It'd be great, Tori, if you could weigh in on this. But number one, I would say in the COVID time, we've seen a number of our customers use Instant Card for employee work from home benefits. So instead of like, okay, COVID-19 hit, right? Instead of saying, all right, let's rush and send everybody a corporate card, which is a long, really not easy to manage process. And it may not be a process that you want to keep in place in perpetuity. Companies tapped on TravelBank and US Bank to simply leverage the capability of Instant Card. And within minutes, finance and accounting teams can go into TravelBank and issue out a virtual card with an expiration date and a monthly, if it's monthly, what our customers decide to use, a monthly budget for that employee to take advantage of. I would say, so that's a top use case. Employee stipends, a very similar concept. Continuing education funds. So many of our healthcare clients are using the card to provide continuing education funds. Typically, it's been very hard for these customers to track the spend against the budget and to reconcile those expenses. And then the last I would say, which is starting to pick up, believe it or not, is recruitment travel specific to HR. So if you have a candidate coming into travel, how do you manage that process? Do you book them on a P card or Ghost card? Do you have them manage the expense on their personal card and then submit for reimbursement? So instead of all those different processes, which can be challenging, take too much time, or just not really be user friendly, I would say those are the 4 top use cases that we see in leveraging Instant Card. Tory, do you have anything to add to that?
I think those are the primary ones. I'm glad you brought up the stipend one, because that seems to be coming up a lot. So initially it is the work from home, let them buy a monitor, buy some things that they would have to put on their personal cards. Stipends is a good one. We're hearing that, but as we've had dozens of companies implement this already since going live last August. And since going live, we have heard a lot of them about the travel component in the future, saying this is really interesting because if you can integrate it into the travel platform as well as the expense platform like we have with TravelBank, you can solve the end-to-end challenge where you are embedding the card in the total experience, and they get that quickly that, okay, now we can send it to someone who's traveling once a year for the company or recruit that's coming in. And not only can you book their air and hotel with this card, but they can also use it for incidentals, like Uber, food, coffee, whatever it might be. And that's why it's so important, as I keep talking about point of sale devices coming online, it's really important that that keeps happening so virtual cards can be used a lot more than they are today. The fallback position will for a while be that personal card in their pocket if for some reason the point of sale device doesn't accept. But we're really reducing how much spend employees and non-employees had to put on their own card. So it's driving towards that end-to-end solution. It didn't start with travel because travel went, away in a heartbeat for all of us, but it's quickly coming back to travel as we hear from our customers. So that's probably a long answer to say, Josh, I agree with you.
Yeah, I appreciate the additional perspective, Tory. I'm sure our audience does as well. So Tiffany, back to your question, how does the company benefit from adopting Instant Card with TravelBank? Let me just take a step back and introduce TravelBank for those who are joining us who are not too familiar with TravelBank. So we are the leading provider, all-in-one provider of travel, expense management, and corporate card management capabilities, all in one platform. So number one challenge that we solve for companies is we simply help them save time and money by consolidating 3, typically, I would say, legacy systems into one beautifully designed, easy to use interface. So think about the benefits of that. From the end user perspective, if you have 3 different solutions, then I'm sure it's going to be 3 different solutions for the end user as well. You have one platform or app or process for booking travel. You have a different one for expense management, and who knows what's going on with the corporate card. So simply bringing it together saves a bunch of time. It's a better employee experience. For the finance and accounting teams, this is the big one here, is we bring new levels of control and visibility to the entire process end to end. From pre-approval budgets and policies set forth on the travel and booking side, to seeing that card data come all the way through the reconciliation process, again, all on a single platform. We hear time and time again from our customers, especially if they're using legacy tools, it's so hard to get access to the right reports. It's so challenging to reconcile card data with expenses after they've happened. And with TravelBank, we simply bring it all together in a very simple and easy to use platform. So I talked about the employee experience. The employee experience is really hits home on 2 different fronts. From an end user, which is really the life I've been living for the last 15 years as a sales professional traveling on the road, It just simply is not a great experience to be using a different travel app, a different expense management app, and then to have to go through the process of linking all of your card transactions into the expense report. Matter of fact, as a road warrior myself, I used to wait until the worst wee hour of my day to go through this process because it was so painful. And it's a big motivating reason why I joined TravelBank in our mission to provide a complete and delightful experience across travel and expense. And that's really what drives us every single day. So the last user experience part that I mentioned is really for our finance and accounting power users who are in the tools every single day. We're going to show you this in the next slide, but think about going to one place, and really this is what you're going to see now, to manage an instant card inside of TravelBank. What I can do now with virtual cards, if I'm a finance or accounting professional, is I simply log into TravelBank. We are already directly connected to US Bank. So within seconds, I can assign my employee a card. I can set the expiration date for that card. I can set the limit for that card. And then within a few more seconds, like Tory mentioned, he's sending me cards, I can send Tory a card as well. And Tory can go out anywhere and make that transaction possible. So instead of having to wait weeks to get the corporate card or to set up a reimbursement process or manage personal expenses on a personal card, I solved the problem by reducing fraud, making it easier for the end user to go make the purchase. And then for the finance and accounting teams, you've basically completed this process within minutes. So when those transactions start to come back through, since everything's already integrated with TravelBank on the expense management side, the card transaction data is already automatically linked to the expense report. So when I go to submit my expense report, whenever I'm done and ready to submit the expense report, all of my card data is there, my transactions are there, my receipts are there, and I can submit that expense report within seconds. So really, those are the main use cases, and there's much more, but I think those are the main ones that I'd like you to walk away from this call with.
Thanks, Josh. For our next topic, let's talk about some predictions. So I feel like, Tory, you might have some great predictions. What do you predict payments will look like in the next year, the next 5 years, even the next decade?
I feel like I should put up a slide right now, like a legal disclosure saying US Bank does not share the views I'm about to share with you, but I'll share them anyway from my personal views, because when you start to look 5 and 10 years out, it's hard enough to even look at this year. Within the next 12 months, what can we do with this technology? And then start looking 5 years out, 10 years out. But it seems to me that plastic's going to be on the decline over the next 5 years. And by the next 10 years, I don't see a strong use case for having plastic cards in the market. We'll get more and more control as we move to a more virtual card contactless payment situation. And who knows what the device is going to be? I don't think it matters. It doesn't have to be a phone, doesn't have to be plastic, it can be glasses or wearables. But the important thing is going to be the control with the seamless experience of both the frequent spender and infrequent spender. So I think about all the information that technology has on me while I travel, from your calendar, email, from your travel to expense to the card. Technology pretty much knows everything about me. Meaning, if I go to San Francisco to have dinner with Josh, it's on my calendar, it's in my bookings, it knows why I'm there doing what I'm doing. So hypothetically, go with me down this rabbit hole for just a second. It should be able to push me a card in real time for the payment I'm about to make. Knowing I'm going out to dinner, taking an Uber, whatever it might be, it could be a transaction per card. It can be a card per trip. And more importantly, the seamless integration from the transaction, already having all the data, including receipt. Right now, we're getting used to snapping pictures of receipts, and OCR technology extracting the transaction information is really cool and important. But there's a future state within the next 10 years where receipts are all digital, being fed into your transaction and attaching to it automatically. When I say receipts, it's real line item receipts coming through, not just at a high level. So there's going to be a tipping point in my mind. And again, going back to point of sale devices, where it's going to be so accepted everywhere that we can really take this technology to the next level and have that seamless experience integrated into a travel and expense platform, which is one thing I love about TravelBank. They have both. Historically, travel and expense platforms, I would say, haven't played real nice together. And so having the end-to-end experience with our card, thank goodness, in the middle of it, is really fun to watch. But I see a much more seamless future where, frankly, no plastic is needed. And we'll see what we can do with that. So I'm very excited. Is that 2 years? Is it 10 years? I can't answer that.
Tory, when will the fax machine go away?
Apparently never.
Josh,
So that's my future, Josh. I don't know what you see from your side of the fence, but I'm really excited about that future.
Yeah, we are as well, Tory. There's an incredible opportunity for us just to help companies, as you can sense from some of the data that we've been talking about. There's numbers of organizations out there who have not adopted corporate card. They're not using virtual card. They don't have processes set up to offer a great experience for their employees. It's still difficult for them to reconcile. So although there's going to be a significant amount of growth and opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years, the way we see it right now, what's in front of us is an immense opportunity to help SMB to mid-market customers. Even enterprise customers struggle with these challenges too, with putting in better controls and systems across travel expense and corporate cards. So for us, it's an extremely exciting time to simply help companies who typically would not have access to these solutions. And then what we're seeing up market, of course, with our enterprise customers is legacy systems really not user-friendly. They're overbuilt, they're costly. So again, helping them with what we've talked about today for us is what we see the opportunity to be. So that's what we're focused on right now. And I think Tory did a great job as an expert talking about what the future holds for us all.
I agree. All right, so it looks like it's about time to head into our Q&A session. And we have some good questions that have come in. So first up, Josh, I think this one's for you. Can US Bank and TravelBank help us manage our other card programs in addition to the Instant Card?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is yes. So in addition to virtual cards, we've been spending a lot of time with US Bank is bringing in the ability to manage all of your corporate card programs, virtual and physical, into TravelBank. So I don't know if you saw, it was a very quick little demo, but in our user interface, you'll be able to load up your corporate card program. And when those transactions occur, all of the reconciliation process happens automatically. And so again, we've taken quite a bit of time in R&D time to make sure that's a seamless process across virtual card and additional corporate card programs that you may be running. Tory, do you have anything to add to that?
It's the same data feed, I would say, that's coming off of the plastic than what's coming off the virtual card. And so we do add some identifying factors to the virtual card so they know the who in the expense reporting process. But we are feeding all of our data to TravelBank, not just the virtual card data, to make sure it's all integrated, especially into the expense platform. And then on the instant card side, the individual who pushed the card can be doing the expense work, or the person who got the card if they're an employee or have access to TravelBank. So really it's all cards if it's a US Bank corporate card, I would say, as far as integration. And we appreciate TravelBank doing that work with us first.
So the next question is along a similar vein, and it also sort of touches back on the predictions question. It asks, virtual card is a great solution, but can it cover 100% of transactions? If not, how does this combine with traditional payments to provide end-to-end coverage?
Yeah, I can take that. It always goes back to point of sale acceptance, right? And so it cannot cover 100% today. There are use cases where if they don't take it at the point of sale device, they can manually enter it in, which covers some of the gaps. So there's going to be a transition period between now and later where the backup would be either corporate plastic at a lower limit or personal cards. And so we're hopeful that that will decrease over time. It's decreasing rapidly right now. But the short answer is it doesn't cover 100%. A good example is fine dining, sit-down restaurants. A lot of restaurants where you walk up to the counter, you can use mobile payment and contactless payment. But at fine dining, sit-down restaurants, today in the US, excuse me, they're not bringing point of sale devices to the table. If you're in Europe or Canada, they bring it to the table, you can tap and go. So it's much more accepted. So future state, I would say that's the last horizon. Once we get past hotel, which we're getting close on, is that sit down restaurant. Can you pay with a mobile payment or a virtual card? So that's going to be key, I think. There is rental car is another last horizon I see, not just sit down restaurants. Rental car, there's a lot of disjointedness in the process with rental cars, as Josh, you know. So that's going to be, we need to solve for that too. But frankly, corporate travelers are using a lot more Uber and Lyft and taxi than they are rental cars. So it solves for that today.
Thanks, Tory. Josh, did you want to add anything to that before the next question?
No. I think Tory did a great job answering it.
All right, great. I think this next one, you can start by answering it, Josh. Somebody said they're interested in our travel solution. How can they learn more about it?
We'd love to spend more time with you individually to learn more about what you're looking for. We'd be delighted to show you a deeper dive of the product. Typically, what we like to do is to make sure we're solving customer problems is just go through a little bit of a consultative discovery to understand what your business objectives are. And that doesn't take us very long. And from there, we can jump right into the product and demonstrate how we would be able to solve some of those challenges that you might be looking to solve. So the short answer of all of that is we'll follow up with you after this call, and we'd be more than delighted to give you a deep dive of the product.
Thanks, Josh. All right, next question. What are the disadvantages of allowing my employees to expense work purchases with their personal cards?
It's a good question. I did a bunch of research a couple of years ago with our innovation team at US Bank. So I interviewed a couple dozen CFOs and controllers trying to understand why and when they were using personal cards. And times have even changed dramatically in the last 2 years. But the first thing I found as I started researching personal card use in corporate America is fraud, abuse is very, very high. And all you need to do to prove that point is go see how many apps there are for creating fake receipts out there in the App Store and how quickly it is for me to create any receipt at any time. And there's books written, unfortunately, many books written on how to defraud your company through personal card use. And it's very, very easy. And so the reason it's easy is the company can't see the actual transaction, right? They can only see what the employee lets them see. Thus, I spent this much on my card, even if the employee is sending in their credit card statement, because they can always go back and reverse that charge and you would never see it. So using personal card just really opens up the door for fraud and abuse by your employees. So it's not a good place to be as much as you might trust them. So beyond that, there's also this concept of, is it fair to have your employees, or is it right to have your employees carrying credit for the company? Or is it discrimination against those who don't have credit or can't use it? Josh, you mentioned this earlier, that maybe that individual doesn't have enough money to buy that ticket, thus they have to go to their manager and sheepishly say, I'm sorry, I don't have the credit limit. So are they looked down upon compared to an employee who does have the credit? It's a bad position to put them in, to have them carrying credit. And what I also heard was, well, we justify it because we allow them to keep their rewards. And so that's a lot of negative to get to the rewards for the company, where they can get rewards anyway. Josh didn't mention their rewards platform that goes with their travel and expense. But if rewards is that important to you, you can also integrate a rewards program that's also saves the company money instead of costing them money. If you want to hear more about that, Josh can walk you through that. But there's a lot of reasons that I think personal card use in corporate America is not a great idea. There's a lot of it still being used today, but it does expose the company quite a bit.
That makes sense. It looks like we have time for one more question. So this last one, does this mean my company needs to start adopting more mobile tools?
I'll take that. I would say today, no, you don't have to. Just being totally blunt, but there is going to become a tipping point at some point in time in the near future. Well, you can figure out what near means to you, where you're going to need to integrate tools such as this, mobile tools, because that's where your employees, just like I like to meet my customers where they're at, you'll want to meet your employees where they're at. I can give you a good example. Not that long ago, large companies like US Bank would not let their employees use Uber and Lyft. They didn't like it. They didn't have control over it. And there was lots of enterprise companies doing that. But the need became so great for the employees that were traveling that they just refused to get into a taxi, because the user experience of using Uber and Lyft overtook the challenge, the risk challenge. So there was some things done behind the scenes to mitigate some of that risk. But ultimately, I believe your employees are going to drive the demand of this up to the point where you'll want to adopt it. And once you see the controls that are in place, it will be a win-win for you and the employee from both user experience and controls.
Yeah, I can also add to that. I can tell you, when we speak with customers and go through the process that we just described, mobile is always at the front and center of the capabilities that the solution extends to our employees. So we believe it's only a matter of time. Tiffany, there's one more question that came in through the Q&A. It's a great question. With all the newfound partnerships between payment systems and OBTs, online booking tools, and TMCs, travel management companies, when will there be a global adoption / partnership with hotel properties? This is our largest hurdle at the moment. And we would say at TravelBank that this process has already begun. Many of the major hotel chains already have direct data integrations with payment networks, and we've already been working with them and issuers like US Bank to pull in this data directly into our systems. Most of the chains already have contactless enabled point of sale systems, as Tory mentioned. So it's just a matter of them toggling on that acceptance property by property, which is no doubt greatly accelerated throughout this pandemic. So great question. Would love to follow up more with you after this call and see what more questions that you have. Tory, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it. It's happening much faster than we thought it would happen. Hotel acceptance and all the integration that goes along with that. Virtual card is the driving factor, but more importantly, how the hotel accepts virtual card is even more so the driving factor, because now it's so easy for them to do so. Like Josh said, they can flip the toggle. They already have the point of sale device. Most of them do, that accept contactless and mobile payment. So they have been toggling this year quite a bit. And so it's happening fast. And I'm going to keep testing it as I travel personally, and hopefully soon I get to travel professionally again.
Likewise, Tory, I think you told me that you actually prioritize businesses that accept the mobile payment, right?
100% I do. I'm definitely a payment nerd, so that wouldn't be a big surprise to my family. But yeah, because I like mobile payments so much, I like how people learn as I use my mobile device to pay, including the merchants. It's funny, even hotels will say as you pull out your phone, no, we don't accept mobile payment. And then when it accepts it, they're shocked. So I always try my phone first, even if there's no symbol on the device itself, the point of sale saying they accept. Because just because the person behind the counter doesn't know doesn't mean they don't accept it. So it's been fun to watch.
That's incredible, Tory. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you both, Tory and Josh, for sharing your expertise, and thank you everyone else for joining us in this discussion today. You can feel free to reach out to us at the following landing page. There's a form where you can get in contact with us directly about these topics. Thank you for joining us today, Tory, Josh. Thanks for everything you shared.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Tory. Thank you all for joining.